The Marvel Cinematic Universe is full of fan-favorite characters, some of which are no longer with us, unfortunately, but I'd say the MCU has done a pretty good job at giving most of its heroes proper send-offs. Yondu's death was a great and heart-wrenching scene. Iron Man's last moments had me crying like a baby in the movie theater, and I also quite enjoyed Captain America finally getting a happy ending. But one character who was low-key done dirty by Marvel is Black Widow. And I haven't really seen much discourse on Black Widow's exit from this cinematic universe, but in my opinion, she was given a raw deal on her way out. Now, I love Iron Man just as much as the next guy. Hell, Tony Stark was my favorite character in the MCU by far, but why did only he get a funeral? In the moment as I first watched Endgame, I was so busy shedding tears and sadness for my boy Tony that I didn't realize we really kind of glossed over Black Widow's sacrifice. In fact, I only really came to this realization years after Endgame's release, when my girlfriend pointed it out to me, and as much as it pains me to admit this, please don't tell her I said this, but she was right. While Iron Man had the big final moment that ultimately ended Thanos and his entire army, Black Widow's death was just as important. If she doesn't give her life, then the Avengers don't get the Soul Stone, and Tony can't snap the bad guys away. And I know that we got a very brief scene where the guys moped around and mourned her before the third act, but why couldn't the funeral have been for both of them? I know that most of us fuck with Iron Man more than her, and that's fine, I do too. But they are both part of the original six, and had portrayed their characters numerous times over the course of a decade or so. All I'm saying is that we could have treated Black Widow with a little more respect on her way out, and maybe you're thinking that Marvel Studios gave her a solo film after her character's death, so that's a sign of respect. But I personally think it's the exact opposite. I mean, the timing of a solo Black Widow film couldn't have been worse. First off, why is anyone gonna care about a Black Widow film after she's already dead? Making it a prequel simply solidified that the film would have absolutely no stakes to it, because we're watching a ghost for the whole runtime. We know Black Widow is going to ultimately be fine because we've seen her do stuff after this film chronologically. Also, Black Widow should have had the first female-led MCU film. The fact that Captain Marvel got to just stroll in and get a solo film off rip is kind of crazy to me. Black Widow had to put in 10 years to get one. And listen, there are certainly some issues with the Black Widow film itself that I'll get into a bit later, but simply releasing it prior to Infinity War alone would make the film better and would make its placement in the franchise feel more natural. Because getting to see Natasha's backstory before her death would have made her sacrifice hit even harder. And since we wouldn't have seen the events of Infinity War or Endgame yet, there would be far more stakes added to the film. Granted, at this point it would have been unlikely for the franchise to kill off Black Widow, in her first solo film no less, but there still would have been at least some level of uncertainty. Now to get into the actual film itself, and Jesus Christ, we really brought out the PS2 graphics for this one, huh? I mean, the movie doesn't look the best in terms of the CGI, let's just be honest. In general, I think the film is perfectly mediocre. I don't find it offensive on any level, but I also don't think it's particularly stand out amongst the MCU's filmography in any way. And given the odd placement of when it was released, I think we really needed to put in some more elbow grease into this one if we wanted it to serve as a proper send-off for this iconic character. This movie in a lot of ways is the great value brand version of Captain America the Winter Soldier. At least from the villain side of things, I feel like Taskmaster and Dreykov are meant to have a similar dynamic as Pierce and the Winter Soldier did, but it doesn't work nearly as well, primarily because of what was done with Taskmaster's character, and off-rip, Taskmaster needed more screen time. The film was advertised in large part off of the back of Taskmaster being the main antagonist, and I think the film's quality would only increase from more of the character, so we could have seen more of their abilities and built up how much of a threat they were. Because Dreykov, while yes, he's fine enough as a sort of poor man's Alexander Pierce, he isn't a great final obstacle for our heroes. Like, there's a reason that the Winter Soldier film ends with Black Widow taking on Pierce, while Cap is simultaneously slugging it out with Bucky. I think something similar to this would have helped make the Black Widow film feel like a more grand experience. I mean, seeing Black Widow have to change her fighting style completely in order to best Taskmaster, since Taskmaster has studied her and knows all of her tendencies, could have created a really badass final fight sequence that showed off Black Widow's adaptability as a fighter and character. Action isn't everything, but there is no standout fight scene in this film, so if we ended on a strategical chess match of a fight between Black Widow and Taskmaster, maybe we could have had something great here. My other big gripe with the Black Widow solo film is that it felt like our titular character was largely outshined by her sister Yelena, and I think this was done intentionally. Obviously, with Black Widow having died in Endgame, this was likely our last time seeing her on the big screen, and I fully believe that MCU creatives intentionally made this film to be more of a Yelena showcase, in order to get us excited for what her character would do in future MCU outings. And this again heightens my issues with the placement of this movie's release, as I don't think this would have happened if Black Widow was still alive. But it gave me the feeling that they were really just using the popularity of Black Widow as a character to get us excited about the next Black Widow, a younger version who will likely play the role for the next decade. And listen, I get that this is the way that the movie industry works, but it felt a little distasteful to me. Scarlett Johansson gave you an entire decade of solid performances as the character, and to only give her a solo film at the very end, once her character was already killed off, just to then primarily use that film as a launching pad for the new Black Widow, is not what Scarlett's character deserved. To me, they should have either not given her a solo film or given her one sooner. This film, again, while I don't think it's awful or the worst MCU movie by any means, feels like an uninspired outing, especially in terms of displaying Black Widow as a character. The additional backstory is nice to get finally, but for me it serves very little purpose given when the movie came out. Which is why I truly think the MCU did Black Widow dirty on her way out of the franchise. Well, if you made it this far, please let me know in the comments. Do you agree with my assessment of how the MCU handled Black Widow's exit from this cinematic world? Or do you really enjoy her solo film and feel fine with it? I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please feel free to check out some other Screen Stories content. I've done a few videos on MCU related topics, so you might find something you like. Until next time, peace.